Hi friends, Vinay Kumar here, international NLP and IAS coach. In this video, my dear friends, let us discuss about a topic that is very widely debated in policy circles. That should we have smaller states in India? Right now, we already have around 29 states, okay, 28. Uh, should we have more smaller number of states, or rather, I would like to put it like this: do smaller states ensure development? Is smaller states sine qua non to development? Is the topic of our discussion for now, my dear friends. Let me put out both sides. First, let us bat for why we may have to have smaller states, the factors that may actually prompt us to go for more number of smaller states in India. If you look at it that way, don't you feel, my dear friends, there will be equitable distribution of resources when you go for smaller states? Equitable distribution of resources, either the natural resources or the resources that has to flow from probably a federal government to the federating units becomes more equitable. For example, if you take the case of the present day Maharashtra, a state like Vidarbha or Marathwada, or if you take the case of UP, a state like Bundelkhand or Harita Pradesh, or if you take even Karnataka for that matter, the northern. So there can be more equitable distribution of resources when when the states become smaller. Right now, what is happening? The capitals are not at the geometric centers. They are, since they are not at geometric centers. That percolation theory of growth, where the growth generally trickles down, has not been true in the case of most states of India, correct? So, one argument that has been put forward by the proponents of, or the people who support the smaller states concept in India, they say it can lead to better allocation of resources, better or equitable distribution of resources. Okay, that's point number one, my dear friends. Okay, point number two. See, in India, we believe in pluralism with cohesiveness. Now, there are many regions that are pressing for statehood based on cultural factor. They say, see, we have been a minority culture in this bigger state where there is a majority culture group who, in whose hegemony we live. So, if we have to protect our language, our customs, our traditions and all that, we need to have a separate state of our own. So, there has been this demand for statehood, especially a smaller state, based on the reasons of culture. How far this is correct? See, if you go by the cardinal principles of Indian Constitution, then if we believe in secularism, if we promote unity in diversity, my dear friends, if we believe in fraternity and all that, I don't think we must be thinking twice to genuinely favor those cultural groups who have been subject to a lot of neglect, administrative neglect or political neglect by the majority cultural groups. For example, many argue that the people of Telangana were always bypassed of the developmental process, or the people of southern Bihar, the earlier Bihar, people of southern Bihar were deprived of their share of development, and they actually stood up. I mean, they also had some cultural homogeneity. The people of Telangana or the people of southern Bihar was full of, or mostly made up of demographic population that was tribal in character, as you know, my dear friends. Of course, there were mining regions, there were huge industrial plants. Notwithstanding that, the thick forests of the southern Bihar, which is the present day Jharkhand, was mostly made up of different tribes. So they saw even that tribal identity being threatened by very rapacious exploitation of resources in the region. This was also one of the factor why they demanded for statehood, the people of southern Bihar and the present day Jharkhand. Okay, that's point number 2, my dear friends. Point number 2 is cultural factors can sometimes necessitate the carvation, sometimes necessitate the formation of newer and smaller states. Okay, that's 2. 3, my third argument is, don't you feel, my dear friends, there will be balanced urbanization when, don't you feel there will be balanced urbanization with the more number of smaller states created? Yeah, balanced urbanization, which means what? For example, if you look at most of the states today in India, the southern states, what happens? I'll take the case of Karnataka. If you take the case of Karnataka, almost all the development seems to be concentrated in and around Bangalore. Okay, if we can have one more state, let us say the northern Karnataka, and we have a capital like Hubballi or Dharwad, then we can see almost same level of development around Bangalore coming around these regions. So we'll have, see, if India is looking at a very significant part of its population becoming urban in the next 10 to 20 years, it will have to be ready for handling and managing this urbanization. Don't you feel it's good to have balanced urbanization rather than having urban islands of prosperity in the oceans of poverty? Yes or no, my dear friends? Correct? Balanced urbanization, that's one of the major factor that you will have to consider when it comes to your case to argue for the smaller states in India. Okay, and most importantly, my dear friends, smaller states, I think, will represent the local needs and aspirations better than huge states which may not be able to do justice to all of its regions or all of its people, especially the ones in the remote corners of the state whose whose areas have bilingual, multilingual demographies. Okay, such people are always at some kind of neglect by the state governments in both the states, my dear friends. Okay, now, so if these are the arguments that I would put forward to bat for smaller states in India to ensure development, there are factors which we can put across to argue against the case of smaller states in India. One important factor that I have to mention is, my dear friends, when it comes to my argument against the smaller state, there is no automaticity to development. Development need not be automatic. Smaller states can themselves not become developed. See, people who, let us say, show Punjab and Haryana and claim, see, look, because they were smaller states, they developed faster and all that, I think are missing out on so many other factors that aided the development of Punjab and Haryana. Punjab and Haryana did not develop only because they are small. Yeah, they developed because they were beneficiaries of the great Bhakra Nangal Dam. They were the primary beneficiaries of the Green Revolution, and more than anything else, they have New Delhi, the national capital, to which people are continuously migrating into. So what happens? The ever increasing population of Delhi put it creates demand for all the agricultural produce, the poultry produce, the dairy produce of the states of Punjab. This explains the prosperity of Punjab and Haryana. And not because they are small. There are so many other smaller states. Why are they not as economically developed as Punjab and Haryana then? How do you explain the lesser development of the states of Northeast India then? Aren't they small? So small states in itself does not explain development. There's no automaticity. So many other factors will have to favor development. Okay, that's number one. Number two, actually one of the argument that we could have put across in the case of why we need smaller states is it may reduce the disputes, but actually it increases. It increases the states that can get into disputes. For example, if you take the southern Indian region, there is a major river water dispute in the Kaveri Basin. We have 4 riparian states in this Kaveri river water disputes. The Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala and Puducherry, 4 states I said, no, okay, 3 states and 1 union territory. So they're all involved in this dispute of river water sharing of Kaveri. Now if you create 2 more states here, we'll have 6 states getting into the dispute. Just imagine the kind of problems administratively, politically it can throw up, my dear friends. Are you connecting to what I'm trying to tell you? Okay, so that's yet another point that I have to make, my dear friends. And does smaller states always lead to equitable distribution of resources? Need not be. In fact, it can many times it can deprive the mother state from which the new state has been carved out of any resources at all. For example, if you take the case of the Bihar, after Jharkhand was severed off Bihar, you could see Bihar deprived of any share of mineral resource at all. And that same will be the case with Madhya Pradesh, because Chhattisgarh has most of the mineral resources, biotic resources, my dear friends. It left Madhya Pradesh high and dry to a very large extent. Yeah. So the states, when they are carved out without looking into proper allocation of resources, may leave some states at jeopardy. Some states experience paucity of resources once the new state has been created. Okay, so that, and 4th factor that I have to mention is, my dear friends, do you think agreeing to a new state today based on a cultural factor will seize the demand for new states by other minority groups? No, because any state that has been created on a cultural factor will still have cultural minorities. Yes or no? So the cultural minorities continue to be oppressed. If that is the case, how many states can you create? Do you want to go back to the pre-independent era we had, where we had around 592 states even at the time of independence, and have one local Raja and Nizam? No, it cannot work like that, my dear friend. So it's okay to have small number of states to the extent that it can bridge the gaps in that regional imbalance. It can bring about more regionally balanced development, balanced urbanization, and long-standing demand of some cultural groups who have been oppressed to a very great extent, especially by administrative, political neglect, can be considered for smaller states. But then the indiscriminate creation of states is definitely not a solution, because it can also, in a way, not to sound pessimistic, threaten the national integration and that nationalist fabric in the country. So this, I think, my dear friends, gives to you some basic points related to how we will have to think into the question of whether smaller state ensures development, or is there need for more and more smaller states. Thank you for learning from this video, my dear friends. See you all in my next video.